I never dated here because I saw vicariously through my roommate how terrible it was. Somehow getting drinks was the replacement of having coffee and breakfast. I personally would rather have coffee or brunch with someone than I don't drink. I find it unproductive, not because I'm holier than whatever. I just don't operate that way. But I always thought it was very strange how she would go to drinks with one guy and then go to dinner with another. So it goes twofold here. So if you're expecting to marry someone that I was blessed with, like a Charlie, you have to be the type of woman that will attract a Charlie. Are you going to church? Are you going to Bible study?
What if everything the internet thought it understood was missing the most important layer? Because according to new clips now circulating online, Cabot Phillips has shared what fans are calling hidden context about Erika Kirk, and the reaction has been explosive. Not because he dropped receipts, not because he made accusations, but because he said just enough to make people rethink everything. In a recent conversation, Cabot didn't frame Erika as innocent or guilty. Instead, he suggested there were details the public never saw, pressures that weren't visible on camera, and dynamics that didn't fit the simplified narratives dominating social media. And once that suggestion hit the timeline, fans did what they always do: they filled in the blanks. Some viewers said this finally explained Erika's silence. Others said it exposed how unfair the outrage had become. And critics accused Cabot of hinting at secrets without backing them up. But here's what made this moment different. Cabot didn't sound defensive. He didn't sound emotional. He sounded measured. And that tone alone was enough to change the temperature of the conversation. Comment sections immediately split. One side argued that Cabot knew more than he was saying. The other said hidden secrets, without proof, are just another way to steer public opinion. And right in the middle were fans replaying old clips, suddenly seeing pauses, silences, and reactions in a completely different light. That's the power of context, because when someone credible suggests there's more beneath the surface, the internet doesn't wait for confirmation. It starts rewriting the story in real time. So the real question isn't what did Cabot reveal, it's why did so many people believe him without needing proof? The reaction didn't begin with outrage, it began with pause. When Cabot Phillips spoke about Erika Kirk, viewers noticed something rare in online commentary: restraint. He didn't rush to label, accuse, or dramatize. Instead, he framed his comments as context, and that single choice is what caused fans to stop and listen. According to clips now circulating, Cabot described his perspective as someone who had observed conversations and pressures behind the scenes. He emphasized that what the public sees online is often a distorted slice of reality, shaped by timing, conflict, and incomplete information. He did not claim inside knowledge of specific events. He didn't present documents or timelines. He spoke about dynamics, how public narratives form, and how people behave differently when they're under scrutiny. That distinction mattered, because in an environment flooded with accusations, calm explanation feels like revelation. Fans weren't reacting to new facts, they were reacting to a new frame. Cabot suggested that some moments widely interpreted as evasive, suspicious, or calculated might also be understood as protective, cautious, or constrained by circumstances people never see. That suggestion alone was enough to trigger re-evaluation. Viewers began replaying older clips of Erika with fresh eyes. A hesitation that once looked like avoidance now looked like deliberation. Silence that once felt incriminating now felt like boundary setting. Tone that once read as defensive now read as exhaustion. This is how reframing works. It doesn't add information, it changes meaning. Another reason fans gave Cabot's words weight was credibility by proximity. He didn't present himself as a distant commentator chasing clicks. He spoke as someone who had been near the conversation, even if not at its center. That perceived proximity created the sense that he knew more, even though he didn't disclose specifics. Online, perceived access often substitutes for proof. Cabot also acknowledged limits. He made it clear that there were things he wouldn't share publicly and that not all details belonged online. Ironically, that refusal increased trust among supporters. Restraint sounded responsible. Responsibility sounded honest. But restraint also creates ambiguity, and ambiguity invites interpretation. Fans quickly filled in the gaps. Some concluded that Erika had been unfairly judged and that Cabot's comments quietly confirmed it. Others accused Cabot of softening the narrative without evidence, arguing that hidden secrets without receipts are just influence dressed up as insight. The divide wasn't about what he said, it was about what people believed he meant. Comment sections reflected that split clearly. Supporters praised the nuance, saying it finally slowed a conversation that had become reckless. Critics demanded specifics, arguing that perspective without proof shouldn't reshape opinion. Both sides agreed on one thing: Cabot's remarks changed the temperature of the discourse. Timing played a role too. Cabot spoke after multiple controversy cycles had already exhausted audiences. In moments of fatigue, people are more receptive to reframes that promise fairness or closure. His calm tone acted as a cooling agent, less fuel, more reflection. But there's a risk here. Perspective can be as influential as evidence. When someone credible suggests there's more to the story, audiences often treat that suggestion as confirmation, even when no facts are added. Over time, that belief can harden into certainty, not because it was proven but because it was repeated. This is the tightrope Cabot walked, offering context without claims, restraint without receipts. Fans interpreted that as maturity. Critics saw it as ambiguity with influence. Both interpretations can coexist, and that coexistence is exactly what keeps the story alive. The key takeaway from this part isn't whether Cabot was right or wrong, it's why his words mattered. In a landscape dominated by absolutes, moderation can feel like revelation. And once a new frame is introduced, it doesn't replace the old story, it competes with it. In the next part, we'll break down why hidden secrets, language hooks fans so effectively, how context quietly turns into conclusions, and where the line sits between responsible perspective and unverified influence. The most powerful thing to come out of Cabot Phillips' remarks wasn't any specific detail, it was the language surrounding them. Once the phrase "hidden secrets" entered the conversation, everything changed. That wording did something subtle but explosive. It suggested that truth existed just out of reach, waiting to be uncovered. And the internet loves that idea. Hidden secrets implies intent. It implies that something was concealed on purpose. It implies insiders versus outsiders. And suddenly, fans feel like they're being invited behind the curtain. That emotional invitation is far more persuasive than evidence because it makes the audience feel chosen. In this case, Cabot never said he was exposing wrongdoing. He didn't accuse Erika Kirk of anything concrete. He spoke in general terms about unseen pressures, incomplete narratives, and how public judgment often ignores context. But once those comments were packaged as reveals, the meaning shifted. Perspective became revelation, tone became testimony, context became conclusion. This is how reframing works online. Fans don't usually separate what someone says from what a headline suggests. When thumbnails and captions promise hidden secrets, the brain fills in the blanks before the video even plays. By the time viewers hear Cabot's measured words, they're already primed to interpret them as confirmation of something bigger. That's why fan reactions escalated so fast. Some fans said they felt relieved, as if Cabot's comments validated a sense that Erika had been misunderstood. That relief mattered. Emotional relief often gets mistaken for truth. When something feels fairer or calmer, people assume it's more accurate, even if no new facts were introduced. Others reacted with suspicion. They argued that hidden secrets without receipts are just another way to shape opinion while avoiding accountability. To them, vagueness felt strategic, and because Cabot didn't offer specifics, critics felt justified in doubting his influence. Both reactions came from the same source: interpretive freedom. Context is flexible, evidence is not. Because Cabot offered context without claims, fans were free to project their own beliefs onto his words. Supporters heard vindication, skeptics heard manipulation, neutral observers heard ambiguity. And ambiguity is fertile ground for speculation. Another reason this language hooks fans is status signaling. When someone speaks as if they know more than they're sharing, audiences assume insider access. That assumption creates trust, not because proof exists, but because restraint sounds responsible. "I can't say everything" often reads as honesty, even when it's simply a boundary. But boundaries don't stop imagination. Once fans accept that there are secrets, they start hunting for them. Old clips are rewatched, silences are reinterpreted, neutral moments are reframed. This is how speculation sustains itself without new input. The audience does the work. Importantly, this doesn't require bad intent from the speaker. Even careful, responsible commentary can be exaggerated once it enters a viral ecosystem that rewards drama. The transformation happens downstream, in reactions, edits, and captions that trade nuance for impact. That's the danger zone. Context offered responsibly can still be weaponized irresponsibly. Another psychological factor at play is certainty fatigue. After weeks of outrage and absolutism, fans crave a narrative that feels more balanced. Hidden Secrets promises that balance. It suggests earlier judgments may have been incomplete, allowing people to revise their stance without admitting they were wrong. They're not changing sides, they're being updated. That protects identity. Online, being wrong feels risky. Being enlightened feels safe. So where does responsibility land? Speakers must recognize how easily implication travels. Creators must avoid turning nuance into exposure. Audiences must resist treating suggestion as proof. This part of the story isn't about accusing Cabot of misleading anyone. It's about understanding how language becomes leverage once it leaves the source. When context is framed as revelation, it doesn't slow judgment, it redirects it. In the next part, we'll look at how fan reactions amplify these reframes, why comment sections often outrun evidence, and how interpretation quietly becomes consensus online. Once Cabot Phillips' comments circulated widely, the real shift didn't happen in the video itself, it happened underneath it. In comment sections, reaction clips, and reposted snippets, fans didn't just respond to what was said. They finished the story themselves. This is where context stops being context and starts becoming truth by consensus. Supporters of Erika Kirk immediately framed Cabot's remarks as vindication. Comments like "this explains everything, people judged her too fast, and finally someone said it" rose to the top. Notice what those statements have in common. None of them reference facts, they reference feeling, relief, validation, emotional alignment. On the other side, critics reacted just as strongly, but in the opposite direction. They accused Cabot Phillips of hinting without accountability. To them, vagueness wasn't nuance, it was influence. Comments like "say it or don't," "hidden secrets with no proof" is manipulation, and "this is just narrative control" gained traction. Both camps believed they were responding rationally. In reality, both were responding to implication. Comment sections reward certainty. The more decisive a comment sounds, the more engagement it attracts. Nuanced takes get buried, questions get ignored. What rises is confidence. And confidence, repeated enough times, starts to feel like fact. This is how belief solidifies without evidence. Another accelerant is social proof. When viewers scroll and see thousands of comments agreeing on an interpretation, they assume consensus equals correctness. Everyone seems to agree becomes a substitute for verification. Even skeptical viewers begin to soften when they're surrounded by apparent agreement. That's how echo chambers form. Fans who felt Cabot's comments were fair gravitated towards spaces that reinforced that reading. Critics did the same in opposite spaces. Each group repeated its interpretation until it felt obvious. Over time, the original ambiguity disappeared. What remained was a polarized set of truths. What's crucial here is that very little new information entered the system. No documents, no confirmations, no corrections. Yet the narrative advanced rapidly. That advancement came entirely from reaction. Reaction content magnifies this effect. Creators read comments on screen validating certain takes. Clips get edited around fan reactions rather than original statements. Interpretation becomes content. Content becomes reference. Months later, people won't remember what Cabot actually said. They'll remember what the comments said he meant. Another factor is moral signaling. Fans often align their interpretation with the stance they believe is morally correct. Supporting Erika becomes a stand against unfair judgment. Criticizing Cabot becomes a stand against misinformation. These moral positions harden quickly because backing down feels like betraying values. At that point, facts struggle to compete with identity. Silence from the people involved also plays a role. When Erika doesn't respond, fans fill the void. Supporters interpret silence as dignity. Critics interpret it as avoidance. The same absence supports opposing conclusions. That flexibility keeps debate alive even without new input. This is why comment sections are so powerful and so dangerous. They don't just reflect opinion, they rewrite memory. Over time, the crowd's interpretation becomes the historical record. This part of the story isn't about blaming fans. It's about recognizing that collective interpretation is a force. Once enough people repeat the same reading, it stops being questioned. It becomes what happened, even if it began as speculation. In the final part, we'll step back and ask the hardest question of all. When context becomes conviction, who is actually responsible? Is it the speaker, the amplifiers, or the audience that rewards certainty over caution? By the time a story reaches this stage, something irreversible has already happened. Context has stopped being context and has quietly turned into conviction. What began as measured commentary from Cabot Phillips is now remembered by many fans as a defining moment in how they view Erika Kirk. Not because of new facts, not because of proof, but because repetition replaced verification. This is how modern narratives settle. Conviction doesn't always come from evidence, it comes from alignment. When a perspective feels fair, calming, or corrective, people accept it emotionally before they assess it logically. Cabot's tone created space for re-evaluation, and that space quickly filled with assumptions. Over time, those assumptions hardened into belief. So who is responsible when this happens? Responsibility is shared but unevenly. First, the speaker. Commentators who offer context without claims aren't wrong for doing so, but words don't stay where they're spoken. Suggesting there's more to the story invites interpretation. That invitation carries influence whether intended or not. Careful language reduces harm, but it can't eliminate downstream distortion. Second, the amplifiers. Creators who package nuance as revelation accelerate misunderstanding. Titles like reveals hidden secrets convert restraint into certainty. Thumbnails promise answers that the content never delivers. These choices aren't accidental, they're optimized. And optimization favors impact over precision. Third, the audience. Every confident comment, every like on a decisive take, every share that skips context contributes to which interpretation survives. Consumption isn't passive, it's participatory. When audiences reward certainty, they teach the system to provide more of it. The damage from this process isn't theoretical, it's reputational. It reshapes how people are seen long after attention moves on. It affects opportunities, relationships, and mental health. And once a belief takes hold, corrections struggle to land not because they're wrong, but because they arrive after identity has attached. That's why so many controversies don't end with answers. They end with distance. Distance from the noise. Distance from the platform, distance that allows life to continue even if the internet never fully forgets. This story doesn't need a verdict to conclude. It needs a reminder: context is not proof, tone is not testimony, consensus is not confirmation. When we confuse these, we don't just misinterpret stories, we manufacture certainty where none exists. Before you decide what this story means, pause and ask yourself, did I hear facts or did I feel relief? Am I sharing information or endorsing an interpretation? If this belief turns out to be incomplete, who carries the cost? Drop your thoughts in the comments with care. Share this if you believe context should slow judgment, not replace evidence. Because clicks fade, beliefs linger, and responsibility belongs to everyone who helps a story travel.